LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the June 5th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out 26 of the weekend's best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can see the three main topics I'm covering listed down in the video description, and if you're watching the recorded version of the show, you should see time indexes down there so you can skip to the next topic or back to the beginning of the topic if you can skip around that way using the time indexes. And whether you're watching as a live or recorded show, down in the video description, you should see this clip list of the 26 clips I'm using. You can follow along the notes that I use. They may not be completely understandable, but you should at least be able to tell what network and what guest and who's talking in the clip. Now, like I said, I'm covering three main topics. The two are the two usual ones. The first two are the Democratic and Republican side of the 2016 presidential race, which are getting closer and closer to merging now. I will have clips of Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders. They were all on the Sunday morning news analysis shows this morning. And then I'll have a couple quick clips at the end on the Libertarian Party. Both a clip of Gary Johnson, who was on NBC's Meet the Press, and then a discussion of third parties over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher from Friday night. And as usual, I want to start the show with some kind of political comedy, and I'm going to start on the Republican side, where Bill Maher, in his monologue, made fun of Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, and his two scandals this week, which he briefly described, and also tried to promote his Donald Trump hashtag that you can see over in this clip.
Two scandals this week. Vetgate about the veterans. You saw that. The Washington Post exposed him, documented proof that Trump promised to donate money to veterans, didn't, and then lied about it. And, you know, Donald Trump, he comes out there, he's like, running a political campaign is hard enough without a bunch of people fact-checking. You know, not taking any responsibility, saying something is everybody else's fault, that doesn't sound very presidential. That, to me, sounds like a whiny little bitch. A whiny little bitch. And then there was Trump U-Gate. Trump University graduates. Where are my Trump University people? It's a great school. The Fighting Orangemen. Come on, it's a great... No. Now, you know about that scam, his Trump University. A judge ordered documents unsealed. And, of course, we found out, as we knew, it's all about preying on desperate people and taking their money, just like a regular university. No, I mean, you know, you give Trump money to learn the secrets of business. And then, of course, you have to give more money to learn the really great secrets of business. Please, it's Scientology without the volcanoes. That's what this is.
I like the Scientology joke and the comparison between Trump U and Scientology. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm following along with my live viewers who seem to be a little surprised I started very close to on time for once. And I'm now going to move from the political comedy to, well, there is some political comedy in the actual news clips, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I first want to show the clips of Donald Trump's interview on CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper. He actually showed, I think, some or all of this back on The Lead with Jake Tapper on Friday. And this is what got Donald Trump in really big trouble, is the third clip I'm going to play. But I'm going to start actually with a clip that I think may show what would be a better mocking name for Donald Trump, or better hashtag than whiny little bitch. You know, I think the last week or couple weeks I've talked about my problems with whiny little bitch. And I think what would actually be better, I saw this a couple places online, and I've even put it, the hashtag in the video description, and maybe in the title if I could fit it, is TrumpleThinSkin. So let me know what you think about TrumpleThinSkin down in the video description, because you'll see in this next clip, Hillary Clinton accused Donald Trump of being thin-skinned, and his answer pretty much proves that, I mean, you tell me if you think this is an answer that shows he's not thin-skinned and she's wrong. And I will discuss what I think after you watch that clip over here.
Clinton, around the same time that Paul Ryan was making his announcement, Hillary Clinton was giving a speech. She had some very tough things to say about you. One of the things she said...
She wasn't giving, she was reading a speech that was written by other people, okay? But go ahead.
Okay.
Sound bites.
One of the things she said was, this is not someone who should have the nuclear codes. It's not hard to imagine Donald Trump leading us into war because someone got under his very thin skin. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, I don't have thin skin. I have very strong, very thick skin. And when somebody's right about me, I always, if you do a report and it's not necessarily positive, but you're right, I never complain. I do complain when it's a lie or when it's wrong. But I have a strong temperament, and it's a very good temperament, and it's a very in-control temperament, or I wouldn't have built this unbelievable company. I wouldn't have built all of the things that I've been able to do in life. I've been #1 bestsellers, one of the best-selling books of all time, tremendous television success.
I don't think anyone...
I've been successful. Well, wait a minute, Jake. I've been successful in every business I've been in, if you think. Real estate, one of the most successful. Television, The Apprentice, which is, forget it. I mean, NBC came to me, they wanted to renew so badly, you have no idea.
Well, what does that have to do with temperament? You're very successful, there's no question.
You can't have that success without good temperament. And I will say this, I was thinking about the word temperament, and we need a strong temperament in this country. We have been led by weak people, weak, ineffective people. Countries have taken advantage of us, whether it's militarily or otherwise. We have been taken advantage of by everybody. We have people with weak temperaments. I have a very strong temperament, but I have a temperament that's totally under control. And she mentions that I'll bring us into war. She's the one that wanted to go into Iraq. I mean, she raised her hand. She didn't know what the hell she was doing. She raised her hand. I said, I don't want to go into Iraq. Iraq is going to destabilize the Middle East. And I was 100% right.
Can I just say one point on that?
I'm going to get to that interesting comment there at the end in just a second, but what do you think about Donald Trump's answer there as to whether he's thin-skinned? He has the strongest, toughest skin. He has the best skin. That's the thing. He has the best, most orangest skin. I don't know what. It was kind of a weird answer, and I think the accusation that he's thin-skinned actually does get under his rather thin skin, that he doesn't seem to recognize that maybe his fatal flaw as a candidate. Who knows? Well, that's why I was pushing the hashtag TrumpleThinSkin, and I think that could really catch on. That's my favorite of all the ones I've seen in the last week or so. But I want to move on to this next clip where Jake Tapper actually challenges Donald Trump on what may be a big issue in the general election if it does end up being Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, which is obviously the most likely outcome at this moment. And you heard Donald Trump in that last answer at the end say he can't have a bad temperament in terms of starting wars because Hillary Clinton, she raised her hand in favor of the Iraq War, and he was against it. And I've seen people in the comment section over the last couple of weeks talk about how that's not really true. And Jake Tapper tries to call him on it, and it's kind of amusing that he says, "Well, I've never been asked for proof of that before." But and you can juxtapose this clip with one I'll show of Hillary Clinton, where she seems ready with clips. Not today, but she will be ready with clips apparently to refute the claim that Donald Trump opposed the Iraq War. But here's Jake Tapper trying to cross-examine Donald Trump on that issue here.
I said, I don't want to go into Iraq. Iraq is going to destabilize the Middle East, and I was 100% right.
Can I just say one point on that? I have looked so long and hard for any evidence.
I'll give it to you. 2004, they had newspaper articles.
Right, but the war started in 2003.
It did, but you know what? You look at, I did an interview with Howard, and that interview was the first time I was ever asked a question. Don't forget, I was an entrepreneur. I'm a real estate person.
Right, but didn't you say to Howard that you thought it was a good idea?
This was before the war started, long before the war started.
Right.
And it was a very I don't know. First, nobody ever asked me the question. When you're doing what I did, nobody was talking about a lot of the questions that you ask me today. And I sort of well, I don't know, I don't know. By the time that started, I was totally against it. And from 2004 on, there's a lot of proof of that, because as you know, there was articles in magazines, there was a lot of articles.
A year after the war started.
No, but I was against it from before it started.
All right.
But, if you go back and look at that interview, and I'd get it for you if you want, but that interview was substantially before the war started. It was the first time I was ever asked a question. And even that, it wasn't oh yeah, we should go in. It was a very like, yeah, maybe, you know.
The only thing I would say, and then we don't have to belabor this point, is if there is evidence of you being against the war strongly before the war actually started, I would love to see it.
Okay, but I think there is evidence. Okay,
I just haven't seen
there is
any.
evidence. Okay, I haven't been asked that question before. Nobody said that to me before. I think there is evidence. I'll see if I can get it.
Okay.
But I will say, from the beginning of 2004, I mean, I've had articles, and I mean, they're in magazines saying I was
2004, no
against,
question.
okay?
No question.
So I was against the war a long time ago, and it destabilized the Middle East, and that's exactly what I said was going to happen. And I also said Iran will take over Iraq because we ruined the balance of those two militarily. We knocked out one of the two balancing prongs. And Iran is as sure as you're sitting there, Iran is taking over Iraq. They're taking over the oil, they're taking over everything.
There's no question about a lot of Shia influence in Iraq. Let's move on to something.
So you can see Jake Tapper is definitely loaded up for cross-examination there. I think he did a pretty good job on that question. But the big story that came out of the Jake Tapper interview that they played on The Lead with Jake Tapper on CNN on Friday was Donald Trump's answer about this federal judge overseeing the Trump U case, who apparently has parents from Mexico, though he's born in Indiana. You'll see Jake Tapper point out multiple times that the judge was born in Indiana, and this is 5.5 minutes long. I think I've seen a couple articles or tweets or Facebook posts that said that Jake Tapper did 23 follow-ups. I didn't actually count them, but you'll see Donald Trump never admits that what he's saying is racist, and it goes around and around. You'll hear like almost the whole thing twice, and there was almost a similar question on Face the Nation with John Dickerson. I'm not going to show all of that, although I will show a little different bit of the answer that Donald Trump gave, or that John Dickerson came up to get out of Donald Trump about Muslim judges. But first, here's the 5.5 minute exchange between Jake Tapper and Donald Trump on why he's imputing the Mexican heritage of this Trump University judge. And I will discuss it after you watch it. And down in the comment section while you're watching this, let me know, well, I've talked about being Islamophobic as being racist before, and all these people say, oh, it's not racist because Islam isn't a race. Well, being Mexican also is not a race, but I still think in the more general sense it qualifies as racism, and you can let me know if you think it's racism or prejudice or whatever word you want to use. Jake Tapper tries to get him to say racism, but he never does over in this clip.
You made about the judge in the Trump University case. You said that you thought it was a conflict of interest that he was the judge because he's of Mexican heritage, even though he's from Indiana. Yeah. Hillary Clinton said that is a racist attack on a federal judge.
Oh, I know. She's so wonderful. You know, I mean, here's a woman that should be put in jail for what she did with her emails, and she's commenting on this.
What about
let
the
me just tell you.
substance of the...
Let me just tell you. It's very simple. I have a case where thousands of people have taken this course, and thousands of people have said great reviews, great reviews. Fortunately, just about everybody that took the courses have signed a review, an evaluation, they call it. And it's gotten tremendous marks. Thousands. I don't mean like 2 people. I mean thousands of people.
Right.
Okay. I have a situation where the woman that brought the case, she was the plaintiff. She was deposed. She was found to be a disaster for them as a witness because she gave an evaluation that was like the best evaluation you've ever heard. Wait just 1 second.
Okay.
And she did a tape, like from your camera, saying that this school was fantastic. It was fantastic. They went to the judge and they said, Your Honor, we don't want her anymore to be our plaintiff. So we said, let's dismiss the case. That's okay. Let's dismiss the case. And he said, no, I won't dismiss the case, and she doesn't have to be the plaintiff.
What does that
Let
have
me
to do
tell
with
you.
his heritage?
I'll tell you what it has to do. I have had ruling after ruling after ruling that's been bad rulings, okay? I've been treated very unfairly. Before him, we had another judge. If that judge was still there, this case would have been over 2 years ago. Let me just tell you, I have had horrible rulings. I've been treated very unfairly by this judge. Now, this judge is of Mexican heritage. I'm building a wall, okay? I'm building a wall. I am going to do very well with the Hispanics, the Mexicans,
So
everybody.
no Mexican judge could ever be involved in a case that involves you?
He's a member of a society where, very pro-Mexico, and that's fine. It's all fine. But
Except that you're calling into
I think
question
he
his
should
heritage.
recuse himself.
Because he's
Then you
Latino.
also say, does he know the lawyer on the other side? I mean, does he know the lawyer? A lot of people say
But I'm
yes.
not
I don't
talking
know.
about that. I'm
Well,
talking
no,
about
that's another problem.
But you're invoking his race when talking
Here's
about
what I'm
whether or not
saying.
he can do his job.
Jake, I'm building a wall. okay? I'm building a wall. I'm trying to keep business out of Mexico. Mexico's fine. There's nothing...
But he's American. He's an American.
He's of Mexican heritage, and he's very proud of it, as I am where I come from, my parents.
But he's an American. You keep talking about...
Jake.
It's a conflict of interest because of Mexico.
Are you ready? I have a case that should have been dismissed already. I have thousands of people saying Trump University is fantastic, okay? I have a case that should have been dismissed. I have a judge that never, ever gives a... Now we lose the plaintiff. He lets the plaintiff of the case out. So why isn't he canceling the case? So we thought we won the case.
So you disagree with his rulings. I totally understand that.
Not me. I've had lawyers come up to me say, you are being treated so unfairly. It's unbelievable. Do you know the plaintiffs in the case have all said wonderful things about the school, and they're suing? You know why they're suing? Because they want to get their money back.
I don't really want to litigate the case of Trump University.
Because if he was giving me fair rulings, I wouldn't say that.
My question is...
Jake, if he were giving me fair rulings, I wouldn't be talking to you this way. He's giving me horrible rulings.
I don't care if you criticize him. That's fine. You can criticize every decision. What I'm saying is, if you invoke his race as a reason why he can't do his job...
I think that's why he's doing it.
But
I think that's why he's doing it.
When Hillary Clinton says it's a racist attack...
Hillary Clinton is a stiff. If Hillary Clinton becomes president...
Paul Ryan today said he didn't care for the way that you were attacking this judge.
Look, I'm just telling you, Paul Ryan doesn't know the case. Here's the story.
Isn't it the definition...
I should have won this case on summary judgment. This is not a case. This is a case I should have won on summary judgment. Do you know the law firm paid Hillary Clinton hundreds of thousands of dollars to make speeches? Do you know the law firm has...
I do. And we've reported, we've reported it on my show.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad. You're the only one. The law firm, wait a minute. The law firm paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to Hillary Clinton for speeches.
Before either of you
She wasn't worth it. Everybody fell asleep during a speech.
Before either of you were running for president, they did. But here's just the fundamental question.
Do you know that they've contributed tremendous amounts of money to her campaign?
Yes.
Do you know they've contributed a lot of money to Eric Schneiderman, the New York Attorney General?
Here's my question.
No, do you know that?
I did not know that.
Do you know that these people went to every Attorney General practically in the country that they could? And do you know this case was turned down by almost every Attorney General from Texas to Florida to many of these states?
Is it not, when Hillary Clinton says this is a racist attack, and you reject that, if you are saying he can't do his job because of his race, is that not the definition of racism?
No, I don't think so at all.
No?
No, he's proud of his heritage. I respect him for that.
You're saying he can't do his job because of it.
Look, he's proud of his heritage, okay? I'm building a wall. Now, I think I'm going to do very well with Hispanics.
Citizen.
You know why I'm going to do well with Hispanics? Because I'm going to bring back jobs, and they're going to get jobs right now. They're going to get jobs. I think I'm going to do very well with Hispanics, but we're building a wall. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico. The answer is, he is giving us very unfair rulings. Rulings that people can't even believe. This case should have ended years ago on summary judgment. The best lawyers, I have spoken to so many lawyers, they said, this is not a case. This is a case that should have ended. This judge is giving us unfair rulings. Now I say why. Well, I'm building a wall, okay? And it's a wall between Mexico, not another country.
But he's not from Mexico.
In my opinion,
he's from Indiana.
He's Mexican heritage, and he's very proud of
but
it.
You're not from Scotland because you have Scottish heritage.
Hey, you know what? I'm not building a wall between Scotland and the United States.
I have two more questions. I'm being told we're running out of time. I interviewed Senate.
So that was the Jake Tapper questioning of Donald Trump in all its glory on the question of whether what he said about this judge in the Trump University case and his Mexican heritage. And of course, he's proud of his Mexican heritage. I don't fault him for that, but I'm building a wall. But, he never answered whether it was racist. And I think, Jake Tapper's gotten a bunch of criticism. I think specifically when Larry Wilmore did the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he got criticism, and I talked about that criticism, but I think he did a pretty good job there. Although one thing I want to point out that he was all loaded in on the racism thing, but one thing that Trump said in the middle there, or 2 minutes from the end, if you were listening, he talked about how Hillary Clinton had made contributions to the Attorney General of New York, who was going forward on this case. And did you know that they went to all these attorney generals, including Florida and Texas, and they wouldn't take the case? Well, I actually read articles this last week that Trump gave donations to the Republican attorney generals in Florida and Texas, and after those donations, they decided not to pursue the case. So it's pretty brash of Donald Trump to bring up Florida and Texas in the middle of his answer when he actually has a lot to answer for there. I was reading your live comments along the way on this issue of racism, and where did the second one go? Oh, I see. Let me see if I go. Here's one. You see, they kind of flash back and forth there. That was weird. Pedro Mars and Chris Call. Pedro Mars was saying that he hates them because they're Hispanic Browns, or I guess maybe that's trying to bridge the racism question. And then you also saw the question there from Chris Call, or the statement there that Islamophobia comes from the same place in your brain as racism. Yeah, I mean, race is a social construct. So what's a race? And Hitler was going after the Jewish race, and so should we call him a racist, or are we saying, oh, he's not a racist because Jews aren't a race? Or it's all just a semantic argument. I think that Islamophobia is racism, and anti-Mexican sentiment is racism, even though Mexicans and Muslims are not a race. But I wanted to show those comments, and I wanted to make also the observation on Jake Tapper's 5.5-minute clip there and what he missed and what I think he did well. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section about how Jake Tapper handled that whole issue. And Donald Trump was not the only one who was unwilling to answer the racism question. I want to show a couple of Republicans who were not willing to answer the question, and a couple more sort of journalistic follow-ups. The first one is from Chuck Todd, journalistic follow-ups from Chuck Todd over on NBC's Meet the Press, where he had the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and as the guest, and he tried to get him to answer the question, is questioning the Mexican heritage of this federal judge racism, and you'll see that he gives the same dodge answer a couple times, and then I think you may actually get the real answer when Chuck Todd comes back with this quote from conservative radio talk show host Eric Erickson about how this is scandalous for the party of Lincoln to be embracing a racist as their candidate. And you'll hear Mitch McConnell give the real reason, I think, why he's embracing Donald Trump in that part of the answer, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Federal judge that's overseeing the Trump University lawsuit. He has essentially said he cannot be impartial because he's Hispanic. Is that not a racist statement?
No, I couldn't disagree more with a statement like that.
Is it a racist statement?
I couldn't disagree more with what he had to say.
Okay, but do you think it's a racist statement to say?
I don't agree with what he had to say. This is a man who was born in Indiana. Mm-hmm. All of us came here from somewhere else. Almost all Americans are either near-term immigrants, like my wife, who came here at age 8, not speaking a word of English, or the rest of us whose ancestors were risk takers and who got up from wherever they were and came here and made this country great. That's an important part of what makes America work.
I want to read you something that Eric Erickson, a conservative commentator, wrote for The Resurgence. He wrote it yesterday. The attacks are racist. To claim someone is unable to objectively and professional perform his job because of his race is racism, and damn the GOP for its unwillingness to speak up on this. The party of Lincoln intends to circle the wagons around a racist. Damn them for that. What do you say to Mr. Erickson?
I think the party of Lincoln wants to win the White House, and the right of center world needs to respect the fact that the primary voters have spoken. Donald Trump has won the nomination the old-fashioned way. He got more votes than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Is he the perfect candidate for a lot of us? No, he isn't. But we have a two-party system here. And Hillary Clinton is certainly not something that I think would be good for the country to continue, basically, the Obama administration for another 4 years.
If you end up with a...
I saw someone called him Mitch McConnell the Turtle. I couldn't disagree more with that statement. Is it racism? Yup. I couldn't disagree more with that statement. Well, I don't know. Is that my little impression? That one, I used to watch that cartoon, so that impression goes all the way back to my childhood. So I've been practicing for many, many years. But the other part about that I thought was really telling was his answer, like I said, to the Eric Erickson question. What about the scandal about the party of Lincoln embracing racism? And the answer being, well, the party of Lincoln wants to win. And I think that is the answer as to why the establishment is doing this thing that I think Chuck Todd, in an earlier part of the program called Sinos, which is supporting in name only Donald Trump, kind of like the Rhinos, Republicans in name only. This is supporting Donald Trump in name only, because they don't really support him, but they'd rather win than have Hillary Clinton win if that's possible. And that seems like what Mitch McConnell's answer is to the racism thing, or to why he's supporting Donald Trump, that he kind of slipped in there, maybe by mistake. You can let me know what you think. Or is that a gaffe? That's the Michael Kinsley definition of a gaffe, when a politician mistakenly states the truth. And I think Mitch McConnell did in that last answer. But he wasn't the only one who was confronted with Donald Trump's racism, and I think it is racism. Here is a potential Donald Trump vice president, probably in the top 5 list anyway of who Donald Trump may choose as his vice president. This is former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich over on Fox News Sunday, and you'll see Chris Wallace does get him to disagree with what Donald Trump said, but doesn't get him to say it's racist, and doesn't follow up as much as Chuck Todd did. And I'll discuss Newt Gingrich's answer after you watch it over here.
That Trump did this week was repeatedly accuse the judge who's handling 2 Trump University fraud lawsuit cases of bias. Here he is.
We're building a wall. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico. The answer is, he is giving us very unfair rulings that people can't even believe.
Are you comfortable with a potential president attacking a federal judge for his heritage?
No. This is one of the worst mistakes Trump has made. And I think it's inexcusable. He has every right to criticize a judge, and he has every right to say certain decisions aren't right, and his attorneys can file to move the venue from the judge. But first of all, this judge was born in Indiana. He is an American, period. When you come to America, you get to become an American. And Trump, who has grandparents who came to the U.S., should understand this as much as anybody. Second, to characterize, if a liberal were to attack Justice Clarence Thomas on the grounds that he's black, we would all go crazy. Every conservative would say it was wrong, and it was racism. And Trump has got to, I think, move to a new level. This is no longer the primaries. He's no longer an interesting contender. He is now the potential leader of the United States, and he's got to move his game up to the level of being a potential leader.
Do you consider what he did here racism?
I think that it was a mistake. I think that I hope it was sloppiness. He says on other occasions that he has many Mexican friends, et cetera, but that's irrelevant. This judge is not Mexican. This judge is an American citizen and deserves to be treated. Now, that means he can attack him as a judge and say he's a liberal and he's against me and he's doing things I don't agree with. And he has lawyers who are supposed to be doing that. If it's a good case, they should file to change the venue.
Trump also attacked...
Now, the one thing about that bugs me as a lawyer is he said change of venue a couple times, which is not what Donald Trump would do. He wouldn't change the venue, which is moving the location of the trial. He would make a motion for recusal, and that's actually something that the attorneys haven't done because they don't really have grounds. You can't make a motion for the judge to recuse himself based on his Mexican heritage and I want to build a wall. That would not be a proper motion. That is my opinion as a formerly practicing lawyer, that Trump's lawyers could not make a motion for recusal on that basis. So maybe that's why Newt Gingrich was saying that it would have to be a change of venue. And something else that was kind of bogus about Newt Gingrich's answer there is that he said, once you're here, once you're born in America, you're an American citizen and you get to be treated like an American citizen. Like if he actually was an immigrant from Mexico, well, then Donald Trump would be okay. And like going after him for, if he were an actual Mexican, that would be one thing. But he's not an actual Mexican. That's what seemed to be the point of Newt Gingrich's answer there. And like I said, Newt Gingrich is one possible vice presidential candidate that Donald Trump may pick, as I said at the beginning of that clip. And another one, but before I get back to more Donald Trump interview clips, I want to show one more possible Donald Trump vice president getting caught totally flat in his answer to an interview question on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos did the greatest cross-examination question, or the best one of the entire program, and the best one I've seen in quite a while. talking to, this is the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so he should know what foreign relations are. And he's talking about, George Stephanopoulos is trying, after he talks a little bit about the need for border security, George Stephanopoulos asks him about Donald Trump's idea to get Mexico to pay for the wall he's going to build. And his answer is pretty nonsensical, as you'll see George Stephanopoulos call him on over in this clip.
Measure. By the way, every Democrat in the Senate voted for that measure. So there's no question that we have agreement in our country that we need greater security. It's strongly bipartisan, and I hope that we will implement that because it is a security threat.
But
to
is
our
it
nation.
realistic to expect Mexico
again,
to pay for the wall?
I think people agree with that.
But is it realistic
What's
to expect
that?
Mexico to pay for that wall?
Well, again, I don't want to get into a debate about the nuances of that. I mean, it's a statement that he has made. I thought this interview was going to be more about the foreign policy arena. I think he has a tremendous opportunity there.
Well, our relations with
fact that
Mexico
he
is
is
foreign
engaged-
policy.
Okay. Well, look, as to how the wall is paid for, that's something that Congress certainly will debate. My guess is there'll be additional debates regarding how the actual...
And trust me, he never answered how he was going to pay for or get Mexico to pay for the wall. But that okay answer, the thing where I thought we were going to talk about foreign policy. Well, aren't our relations with Mexico foreign policy? Okay, well, that... for some reason, maybe you didn't find that amusing. That was like... I think that was like better than the actual political comedy. I mentioned at the beginning of the show I was going to show actual news clips that were funnier than the political comedy. Maybe it's just me, but I found that really, really amusing. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And I'm actually going to move back to a clip of Donald Trump. This is his interview on CBS's Face the Nation, talking to John Dickerson, who also asked him a question about why he was attacking this Mexican judge's federal judge's Mexican heritage, and whether that was racist. And he got a lot of the same answer that I already showed in that 5.5-minute clip from NBC's Meet the Press. So I don't want to show that whole thing over again. But like I said, when I showed that clip, John Dickerson brought up this topic of, well, what if the judge was Muslim? And I thought Donald Trump's answer was also pretty informative, as I will discuss after you watch that over here.
But what if he was a Muslim, though? You've been very tough on temporary Muslim immigration bans. So would a Muslim judge be? Would a Muslim judge be also out of the question here?
We are allowing tremendous numbers of people coming into this country that we know nothing about. We have a problem in this country. We are going to have big problems. You know, I've been pretty good at predicting things, John. We're going to have big problems. We have people coming into this country, totally undocumented. They don't know anything about them. They don't have paperwork. I've interviewed and talked to the best law enforcement people in the business. There's no way of knowing where they come from. And we're taking them in from the so-called migration. They're being sent all over the country. We have people that don't know what they're doing.
My question is, if it were a Muslim judge, would you also feel like they wouldn't be able to treat you fairly because of that policy of yours?
It's possible, yes. Yeah, that would be possible, absolutely.
Isn't there sort of a tradition, though, in America that we don't judge people by who their parents were, where they came from?
I'm not talking about tradition. I'm talking about common sense, okay? He's somebody, he's proud of his heritage, and I think that's great that he's proud of his heritage.
But you're saying it's a barrier to him doing his job.
Oh, he's not giving me fair. He's not treating me fairly.
And you think it's not because of where his parents came from?
I've had numerous lawyers. Look, I have a case where thousands of people have said it was a great school. They've written.
And I think you've heard all that before, once or twice, or maybe even 3 times in that interchange with Chuck Todd. I'm sorry, did I say Chuck Todd? It was actually with Jake Tapper earlier. And did I say Chuck Todd before? Sorry about that. I'm like rushing through this show. I have like a deadline and as to when I have to finish, so I apologize for that. But I did want to show that one part of the John Dickerson interview. And before I go back to 2 more clips from John Dickerson's interview of Donald Trump that I also think are worth showing, I wanted to show one more Chuck Todd clip. This is covering something that was actually on all of the shows to one degree or another, the death this last week of Muhammad Ali, which he wasn't just a sports figure, he was also a big political figure in the United States in the 60s and 70s and even beyond. And even recently he reacted to Donald Trump And I'm not going to show any of the whole, I'm not going to cover the Muhammad Ali story, even though I think it's really interesting. But like I said, I'm kind of in a rush. But I wanted to show this one clip because it relates to Donald Trump. First, there's a clip showing, what a principled Muslim Muhammad Ali was back when he wouldn't fight in the Vietnam War. And then there's a quote of how he responded to Donald Trump's proposed ban on Muslim immigration, which I will discuss after you watch that clip. Over here.
He refused induction into the Army during the Vietnam War, a move that cost him 3.5 years of his career in his prime.
Just how far would you go to keep from taking up arms? I'll die. It's anything that's against my religious beliefs. I'd rather face machine gun fire before deviate from the teachings of Almighty God and the religion of Islam.
And Ali was in it to the end. Just this past December, he put out this statement after Donald Trump's proposed Muslim ban following the attacks in Paris and San Bernardino. Speaking as someone who has never been accused of political correctness, I believe that our political leaders should use their position to bring understanding about the religion of Islam and clarify that these misguided murderers have perverted people's views on what Islam really is. Well, to remember the man.
Yeah, that was a great statement, and Muhammad Ali, I think, was a great political and social leader. I think he was, people talk about social justice warriors these days. I think he was a real live social justice warrior. He fought for social justice and freedom of conscience, and he really had principles. I saw in at least one pundit compare him to Donald Trump in that they're both arrogant, bragging all the time. But the big difference between they both had big ego, or Donald Trump has a big ego, and Muhammad Ali also had a big ego. But Muhammad Ali had principles that he sacrificed for, and I can't really think of any principles that I mean. It seems more like Donald Trump sacrifices his principles for his ego, to the extent he even has any principles. But that's my opinion. You can let me know what you think of that comparison down in the comment section. Before I get on to the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race, where I think I have about 6 clips of Bernie Sanders and about 6 clips of Hillary Clinton, I want to finish up with 2 more clips of Donald Trump from the John Dickerson interview on CBS's Face the Nation. There were 2 questions. The last one I'll show because it's actually brought up in the Hillary Clinton interview. But before I get to that one, I want to show this clip of John Dickerson trying to contradict Donald Trump on whether or not he supported intervention in Libya. Earlier, I showed a clip of Donald Trump claiming he was against the war in Iraq, unlike Hillary Clinton, and I'll show a clip of Hillary Clinton contradicting that, or claiming she has evidence to contradict that in just a few minutes. But here's John Dickerson over on CBS's Face the Nation trying to get Donald Trump to admit that he did support some intervention in Libya, and you'll see by the end of the question, he's saying, "Oh well, I didn't support the strong intervention in Libya," or he wanted different intervention. But you can see how he is kind of waffling and on both sides of the issue as usual over in this clip.
You've been highly critical of Libya and Hillary Clinton. You were also for military action to oust Gaddafi and military action to take care of the humanitarian situation in Libya. You supported that.
When you say I supported it, I supported Libya?
Yeah, you supported intervention in Libya.
I did? Where do you see that?
In a video blog from 2011, you said,
"Now, we should go in, we should stop this guy, which would be very easy and very quick. We could do it surgically, stop him from doing it, and save these lives."
That's a big difference from what we're talking about. I mean,
but you were for intervention.
Don't forget, I'm the only one. I made a lot of money with Gaddafi, if you remember. He came to the country, and he had to make a deal with me because he needed a place to stay, and he paid me a fortune, never got to stay there, and it became sort of a big joke. But the fact is that Libya was a disaster from the standpoint of the way it was handled. I mean,
but you were for intervention, just to clear that up.
I was for doing something, but I wasn't for what you have right now. And right now, ISIS has their oil, John. ISIS is selling, and that's among the finest oil in the world. ISIS has taken over the Libyan oil. And we don't do blockades. We don't do anything. They're selling it. They're making a fortune with it. So we go out, we do Libya, we do it poorly as you can do it. You can't do worse. And then now, if you look at what's happened, I mean, the end result is ISIS is selling the oil, and it's a total mess.
This is one of the things that confuses some people about your positions, though. You said you weren't for intervention, but you were for intervention in Libya.
I didn't mind surgical, and I said surgical. You do a surgical shot, and you take them out. But I wasn't for what happened. Look at the way it's, I mean, look at with Benghazi and with all of the problems that you've had, it was handled horribly.
That's not the way it's supposed to be. Since then, you said you were never for intervention. So
I was never for a strong intervention. I could have seen surgical where you take out Gaddafi and his group.
You said Hillary Clinton should go to...
So he changed from never for intervention to never for strong intervention. Donald Trump has this way of getting on all sides of the issue by the way he talks, where he says one thing and then he says the contradiction. I think I showed a couple weeks ago where he said, I'm not for guns in schools. Of course, sometimes teachers have to have guns in schools or guns in the classroom, not guns in schools. I'm not for guns in the classroom. Of course, sometimes teachers have to have guns in the classroom. And when he went after John McCain as a prisoner of war, he said he's a war hero. I don't know. I prefer people who aren't captured, or maybe he is a war hero, or he said he is a war hero. Maybe he's not a war hero. He almost the way he talks is a way to avoid any accountability or responsibility for the things that he says. But I guess that kind of leads or plays into Bill Maher's hashtag on him. But like I said, I only have one more Donald Trump clip before I get to the Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders clips. I'm playing this one because it actually comes up in one of the Hillary Clinton interview questions. It's Donald Trump's answer as to why Hillary Clinton should be in jail. That's the question John Dickerson starts out asking him, and then actually gets him to say that his attorney general will reinvestigate Hillary Clinton if he becomes president and she's cleared by this attorney general, which is what the part of the answer that Hillary Clinton will respond to in just a few minutes. But here's the full 3-minute back and forth between John Dickerson and Donald Trump from this morning here.
You said Hillary Clinton should go to jail. If the FBI, which is investigating, if there's no indictment, will your attorney general go after her?
So I have spoken to, and I've watched, and I've read many, many lawyers on the subject, so-called neutral lawyers, not even on one side or the other, neutral lawyers. Every one of them, without a doubt, said that what she did is far worse than what other people did, like General Petraeus, who essentially got a 2-year jail term. General Petraeus and others have been treated, their lives have been, in a sense, destroyed. She keeps campaigning. What she did is a criminal situation. She wasn't supposed to do that with the server and the emails and all of the other. Now, I rely on the lawyers. These are good lawyers. These are professional lawyers. These are lawyers that know what they're talking about and are very well versed on what she did. They say she's guilty as hell.
But it sounded like you were making a promise for your attorney general that if you were elected, this is one of the things, this is a commitment you were making.
That's true.
It's a commitment to have your attorney general.
I would certainly have my, very fair, but I would have my attorney general look at it.
Even if the investigations
and
go
as you
through.
know, you have a 5 and maybe even a 6-year statute of limitations.
But even if the current investigations don't find anything, you'd have your attorney general go back at it.
Yes, I would, because everyone knows that she's guilty. Now, I would say this, she's guilty, but I would let my attorney general make that determination. Maybe they would disagree, and I would let that person make the determination.
And what for you exactly is she guilty of?
She is guilty of the server. She is guilty of, you look at confidential information, all of the information that probably has gotten out all over the world. Yeah. And then, you know what, she's also guilty of stupidity and bad judgment.
But that's not, if that were criminal, we'd all be in jail.
No, I'm not even saying that part is criminal, but she's certainly guilty of that. In terms of this country, she is guilty of having just bad, how could she do a thing like this?
But what gets him to jail, though? What's the difference here between rhetoric and law?
What the lawyers are saying is what she did in terms of national security. They have very strict rules and regulations. She's broken all of them.
So the classification issue.
She's broken all of them. Of course it is. She's broken so much. But she's so, if you look at this from the standpoint of why did she do it, judgment, the word judgment. This isn't criminal judgment. You make bad judgment, although actually under those rules and regulations, judgment is even criminal. You're not supposed to do it. If you make a mistake, they don't take that into account. Why would a person, and how can a person with this kind of judgment become the president of the United States? Now, Think of this. We're in a cyber world. This is a cyber world. This is a very complex, we're in a world like we've never been in before. If we're in a cyber world and she can't even handle her emails, how can she be president? And we're being hacked all over the place by Russia, by China, probably. I mean, to the best of everyone's knowledge, it seems to be. But listen to this. So we're in a cyber world, and she's playing around with servers and emails. How can she be running this country? She doesn't know what she's doing.
I want to move on to another.
So unfortunately, I think we're going to be hearing a lot of that in the next 5 months till the November election, with the assumption that Hillary Clinton is going to be the Democratic nominee, which is the most likely outcome, more and more likely. Well, you know, we'll see what happens on Tuesday, but even if Bernie Sanders wins California, which he's kind of statistically tied with Hillary Clinton right now, he's way behind in New Jersey, and even just to win a majority of the pledged delegates, I think he has to win something like 70% of the vote in all the remaining contests, and that seems very unlikely, not impossible. I'm going to be voting for Bernie Sanders on Tuesday here in California. So, like I said, that's the end of the Democratic side, the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race. Now I want to move on to the Democratic side, and I like to start with a little bit of political comedy, and this sort of has to do with the Republicans and the Democrats, so it's kind of a transitional clip. But the part that I'm going to criticize the most is at the beginning, where this is from Bill Maher's new rule, and I put a link down in the video description. You can watch the entire thing. It's available free on YouTube. It's about how capitalism eats everything, but he starts off talking about socialism, and I've talked about this so many times. It's one of my pet peeves that the real definition of socialism is government or collective or group ownership of the means of production, and you'll see all the things Bill Maher talks about are not really socialism. They're things like Social Security and welfare payments and wealth redistribution, where you tax the rich higher and you give certain social safety net to the poor and sometimes even the middle class, but like Social Security. But none of that is actually socialism. But what he says about capitalism, I think, is more on point, and I will discuss that after you watch this almost 2-minute clip from the end of Bill Maher's program last Friday, the real-time new rules section over here.
Since this year's presidential race features both an unabashed socialist and a bona fide capitalist pig, someone needs to explain to the free market solves everything crowd that when it comes to socialism, you're soaking in it. Marco Rubio says, if you want to live in a socialist country, why not move to a socialist country? Oh, you mean like Florida, where everyone's on Social Security? Yes, so many Americans hate the word socialism, but love the concept. Medicare, unemployment, disability, farm subsidies. Forget the transgender debate. What America really needs is a separate bathroom for welfare queens. And America's real religion is capitalism. And like any religion, it needs a devil. And that devil has always been socialism. In 1961, Ronald Reagan said if we passed Medicare, we'd wind up telling our children what it once was like in America when men were free. Thanks, Nostra dumbass. Oh, we hate the red team. Republicans always think if you allow a little socialism, it'll spread out of control, but actually it's the opposite. It's capitalism that we've let spread out of control. It's eaten our democracy. It's eating our middle class. It's eaten our healthcare system, our prison system, our news media. It's even eaten our food system so thoroughly that a lot of our food is no longer something that should be eaten.
And like I said, that last part I agree with, where he's basically arguing that we should be in favor of capitalism that's constrained by regulation and a social safety net. And I agree with that. I just don't agree with Bill Maher's definition of what is socialism. I I think I made a video a while back, Bernie Sanders, the right kind of democratic socialist for America, or right kind of socialist for America. And I guess they're talking about democratic socialism, which isn't really socialism, but I always seem to need to point that out. And anyway, it's kind of an excuse to play that Bill Maher clip, which I thought it's worth watching. The entire Bill Maher new rule, like I said, it's available free on YouTube at a link I put down in the video description. Now I actually want to move on to one of the 2 Hillary Clinton interviews from this morning. This is the first clip from her interview with Jake Tapper on CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper actually had all 3. He had Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders. And you can watch those full interviews also at a link I put down in the video description. But this is where Jake Tapper asks her about how she called Donald Trump thin-skinned, and he responded by attacking her vote on Iraq and her temperament based on her vote on being in favor of the war in Iraq. And here is I kind of promised you this earlier, that she seems to think that she has the evidence that's going to show that Donald Trump was also in favor of the war in Iraq. And I will discuss her answer after you watch that minute and 45-second clip here.
Secretary, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Jake.
Appreciate
Good to see you.
So you had some very strong comments about Donald Trump. I asked him about specifically the one where you said that you couldn't trust him with the nuclear codes. It's not tough to imagine him bringing the country into war because somebody got under his very thin skin. That's pretty close to a quote. Mm-hmm. And his response was, hey, she's the one that voted to go to war in Iraq. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think the speech was really an attempt to present to the American people everything that he has said, what he has proposed that he would do, which violates Republican and Democratic agreement about how to be strong in the world, how to present ourselves, how to protect our allies and our friends, how to take on our rivals where necessary. And I'm happy to put my record up against his comments, his rants, and his outright lies anytime.
But his specific criticism was, why would you accuse me of going to war when you actually brought us into a war that he criticizes as an unnecessary one?
Well, he supported it. We have evidence and audio of him supporting it. So I think that's another example of him trying to rewrite history. But I said, look, it was a mistake to vote for that. But I have a lot more experience as a senator, as Secretary of State, that I am more than happy to talk about throughout this campaign. Because when people vote, they are voting for the president, who is our commander-in-chief. And I have said, and I believe this with all my heart, he is not qualified to be commander-in-chief, either by experience, preparation, or temperament.
There were some really...
So there's Hillary Clinton sticking with several of the talking points that she made in this big speech, where it was supposed to be a big foreign policy speech, but turned out to be more an attack on Donald Trump's qualifications to be commander-in-chief and to be in charge of U.S. foreign policy. And like I said, that also in about a minute from the end there, she sounded like she has some evidence ready to spring on Donald Trump to show that he was in favor of the Iraq War too. And I don't know, that makes me wish even more that we had Bernie Sanders as the candidate, because that would make him the only one who wasn't actually in favor of the Iraq War. But before I get to more Bernie Sanders clips, or the 6 Bernie Sanders clips, I want to show, I think it's 5 more clips of Hillary Clinton. And this next one is actually something that juxtaposes with a Bernie Sanders clip I'm going to show in a few minutes. It's also from the same Jake Tapper interview of Hillary Clinton, where Jake Tapper asks about this violence this last week in San Jose. It was anti-Trump rioters basically threw eggs and did other things to harass Trump supporters. And here's Hillary Clinton's answer that I want you to juxtapose with the answer from Bernie Sanders I'll show in a little bit later. But here's how Hillary Clinton deals with that issue. And
really ugly images on the TV screen. Attacks by anti-Trump protesters against people who support Donald Trump. Do you condemn the violence? What is your message to people who are protesting Donald Trump?
I condemn all violence in our political arena. I condemned it when Donald Trump was inciting it and congratulating people who were engaging in it. I condemn it by those who are taking violent protests to physical assault against Donald Trump. This has to end. He set a very bad example. He created an environment in which it seemed to be acceptable for someone running for president to be inciting violence, to be encouraging his supporters. Now we're seeing people who are against him responding in kind. It should all stop. It is not acceptable.
At the end of the day, do you think that those violent anti-Trump protesters actually might be helping him in a way by showing his opposition in such a horrendous light?
I don't think any of this helps anybody. I don't think his protests that were led by his supporters, beating up people who were peacefully protesting against Trump, helped Trump. And I don't think that people who are protesting and using physical violence against people supporting Trump are helping anybody. So I want it to just end, Jake. I don't want to parse it. I don't want to talk about the political implications. I want it to end. The police have a hard enough job trying to make sure that we're able to gather and talk about the issues facing our country. And Trump has lowered the bar. And now, is it a surprise that people who don't like him are stepping over that low bar? I don't think it is. He needs to condemn all violence by everyone. I already have. I will continue to do so.
The Sanders.
So I think that is a really good answer from Hillary Clinton. I think it's better than the answer I'm going to show from Bernie Sanders in a few minutes on the same question about the condemning the violence. You'll see Bernie Sanders does, uncategorically condemn the violence by anyone, including his own supporters, since Donald Trump in that earlier clip I showed kind of blamed it on Bernie Sanders because they had Bernie Sanders signs. But I think Hillary Clinton took the opportunity there to pivot over to an attack on Donald Trump and his incitement of violence, and so it's a better answer and a longer answer than the one I'm going to show from Bernie Sanders in a few minutes. But I want to show one last clip of the Hillary Clinton interview that Jake Tapper did on CNN State of the Union, and I think CNN did something a little bit fishy or deceitful or media bias in this next clip where Jake Tapper asks a good question, a good confrontational question about how she was not willing to say that Obama was inevitable back in 2008 when he was having problems winning California. And so why should Bernie Sanders say it's inevitable now? But you'll see she starts talking about her numbers of delegates, and CNN puts up a chyron, the text at the bottom of the screen that shows the pledged plus the unpledged delegates, which I've talked about so many times, that unpledged delegates can change their minds all the way up until the convention. So it's really, and they've never changed the outcome when the pledged delegates have, different from what the pledged delegates have decided. And it's a real long shot for Bernie Sanders to get a majority of the pledged delegates. Like I said earlier, he'd have to get like 70% of the vote in the remaining primaries, which he's not going to do. But if he were to get that amount, then it would be like a big upset, and it could happen. It's very low probability, but showing the pledged plus the unpledged delegates together, that's, I don't think, fair to Bernie Sanders. So look for that in Hillary Clinton's answer to what was, like I said, a good question by Jake Tapper over in this clip.
The campaign has been mounting a very strong challenge against you here in California, and in fact, it's neck and neck according to public polling. Anybody could win. 8 years ago, when you were behind then Senator Obama, although you were closer than Sanders is with you, you said, if Obama is so inevitable, why is he having such a tough time closing the deal? So let me just put it to you. You are inevitable in your view. You will be the nominee. Why is it a tough landing for you in California and elsewhere?
Well, let's see what happens on Tuesday. I'm very proud of the campaign we're running here. And I believe on Tuesday I will have decisively won the popular vote, and I will have decisively won the pledged delegate majority. You can't get much more than that out of a primary season. And in fact, the contest between then Senator Obama and myself was much closer. By some standards, I actually led a little bit in the popular vote, but I fell a little short in the pledged delegates. So I had a decision to make. A lot of my supporters said, hey, let's keep going, let's make sure that we go to the convention. And I said, no. I ran to become president because I have deep values and beliefs about what should be done in our country. I am much closer in the goals that I think we should be pursuing with Barack Obama than I am with the Republicans. The same is true with Senator Sanders and myself. We both want to raise the minimum wage. We both want to get to universal health care coverage. We both want to make sure Wall Street never wrecks Main Street again. We share so many of the same goals. We have different approaches, different ideas about how best to achieve those. So if you are a supporter of mine or you're a supporter of Senator Sanders, and you look at this contest, which has been largely on issues, although we've had our differences, compared to the Republican side, which has been largely on insults and plans that never would be feasible.
It's gotten tough with you and Sanders, though. I mean, not as tough,
well, but it's nothing like what we saw on the Republican side.
Yeah.
And so after Tuesday, I'm going to do everything I can to reach out to try to unify the Democratic Party, and I expect Senator Sanders to do the same, and that we will come together and be prepared to go to the convention in a unified way to make our case to leave the convention, to go into the general election to defeat Donald Trump.
There's one other thing about Donald Trump I want.
So, like I said before I showed that clip, I think Jake Tapper did a fairly good job of questioning, but the text that came up about the number of delegates, it misrepresented it didn't ever show the pledged versus unpledged delegates, and never during the show that I saw did they ever put up that number. Even when Bernie Sanders later is talking about the super delegates and the difference between pledged and unpledged delegates, CNN never shows that number. And Bernie Sanders is I think within about 260 rather than what was that, 800 or something. And Hillary Clinton's going to go over the top if you count the unpledged delegates, the super delegates, by the time the polls close in New Jersey. That's what they keep saying on all the shows. But if you really just count the pledged delegates, like I think is the best way to do it, then she's not going to have clinched the nomination. We'll have to see on Tuesday which networks say that she's clinched the nomination based on pledged plus unpledged delegates. I don't think that's really fair. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section on that issue. Those were the 3 clips I wanted to show from Jake Tapper's interview of Hillary Clinton. She actually did 2 interviews this morning, and I want to show 3 clips from the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos interview before I get to 6 clips of Bernie Sanders. And in the first of these 3 clips, George Stephanopoulos asks her a question about Donald Trump, where I think you'll hear her summarize her character attacks on Donald Trump, basically asking what's most dangerous about his temperament, I think was the question. And you can see Hillary Clinton's answer to that over here.
Coming from his temperament.
I think he engaged mind. Other countries have nuclear weapons, including Korea, Japan, Saudi Arabia. He said he didn't. A lot of news outlets, of course, easily pulled up the video of him saying all of that. His unpredictability, his putting everything in highly personal terms, has rattled, and that's the word President Obama used, has rattled our closest allies, has caused a lot of serious concern around the world because people are not used to seeing anyone, a Republican or a Democrat, running for president who is so loose with the truth, so divisive, and so dismissive of very legitimate concerns about safety, security, our values, and who we are as a nation.
As you know, he said several times.
So that's Hillary Clinton's talking points on Trump's character, and I can't say I disagree with much of what she said there, but I want to show, and I wanted to show that summary because I thought it's a good preview of what the general election is probably going to look like. It's going to be very negative on both sides, assuming Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee and Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, which is what seems like the most likely outcome, as I've been saying over and over again throughout the program. And in this next question, though, I can't say I agree with the way Hillary Clinton answers. This is the one I promised where George Stephanopoulos shows a quick clip of that 3-minute answer that Donald Trump gave on Face the Nation about how he's going to use his attorney general to investigate Hillary Clinton's use of emails. And you'll see, probably because this just happened this morning, and she didn't have a prepped answer, so she refuses to answer that and instead talks about the whole Mexican heritage of the federal judge question. And it's kind of I think she even says in this answer that Donald Trump likes to distract us, and then she kind of distracts us with her answer, which, I don't know, kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section after you watch it yourself over here.
Said several times over the last few days that he thinks you should be going to jail over the email issues. And on Face the Nation, he's just given an interview to John Dickerson where he said he would look at this when he becomes president. Listen.
I would have my attorney general look at it because everyone knows that she's guilty. Now, I would say this, she's guilty, but I would let my attorney general make that determination. Maybe they would disagree.
Your response?
Well, it's a typical Trumpism. And I don't have any response. You know, when he attacks me, I am not going to respond. But I think it is in keeping with his very vicious public attack against the judge, the federal judge who is hearing the case against so-called Trump University, a judge who has an impeccable record as a prosecutor, who actually spent, as I'm told, nearly a year in hiding because of threats from criminal drug cartels against his life, who was appointed first by the Republican governor of California, Governor Schwarzenegger, then appointed by a Democratic president, President Obama, because of his extraordinary legal record. And what Trump is doing is trying to divert attention from the very serious fraud charges against Trump University that have basically been confirmed by some of the highest officials who worked with him. So this is typical. He does have that thin skin. And, you know, Judge Curiel is as American as I am, and certainly as American as Donald Trump is. And Trump's continuing ethnic slurs and rants against everyone, including a distinguished federal judge, I think makes my point rather conclusively.
But, Madam Secretary.
And you can't disagree with much of what Hillary Clinton said there about Donald Trump's attack on the Mexican heritage of this federal judge and how it makes her point about him being thin-skinned. And she seemed real ready to answer a question about that, but not so much ready to answer the question about how Donald Trump had promised to send his attorney general after her if he ends up being elected president, which is actually improper to, for the executive to prejudge a case. And of course, that's why I showed the full 3-minute clip. He didn't actually say exactly that, but he did kind of, like I said earlier, the classic Donald Trump answer where he's like on all sides of the issue and he seems to imply one thing while also saying almost the exact opposite. It's, he's slippery too, but he's also thin-skinned, as Hillary Clinton said there. But what was kind of bogus about her answer, like I said before I showed the clip, is that she criticized Donald Trump for diverting attention, and she herself in her answer was diverting attention from the original question, which was about her emails. And George Stephanopoulos, to his credit, followed up on that, and I'm going to show like 2.5 minutes back and forth where he does his best to get Hillary Clinton to answer some questions about the emails. First about breaking rules, and she then, when he asks about breaking rules, she pivots to this issue of what other secretaries of state have done and doesn't ever really answer the question about breaking rules. And you'll see also at the very end he asks about if she or her agents have had any contact with the FBI, which she also kind of dodges, as I will explain after you watch the clip yourself. Over here.
On the email issue, as you know, the State Department Inspector General report was quite tough on your practices, and it concluded, I want to show it right here, that Secretary Clinton had an obligation to discuss using her personal email account to conduct official business with their offices. And according to these officials, diplomatic security and the information resource management offices did not and would not approve your exclusive reliance on a personal email account to conduct department business because of the restrictions in the Foreign Affairs Manual and the security risks in doing so. Do you now accept their conclusion that your exclusive use of a personal account was not allowed, that you broke State Department rules?
You know, look, George, I thought that the report actually made it clear that the practice I used was used by other secretaries, other high-ranking State Department officials.
No one else had
it was a
exclusive
mistake
use
if
of
I
a
had to do
personal
it.
account.
If I had to do it over again, I certainly wouldn't. But I think that the rules were not clarified until after I had left. Because it had been the practice of others. There was certainly reason to believe, which I did, that what I practiced was in keeping with others' practices.
But you were the only one who had exclusive use of a personal account. Secretary Powell did have a personal email account as well, and they were very, very clear. Go ahead.
Well, George, I have to tell you that I will say it was a mistake. I would not do it again, but I think that the rules were not clarified until after I had left, and the first Secretary of State to use a government email account was John Kerry some months into his tenure. Those are the facts.
But the report, so you don't accept the conclusions of the report because they say you were unmindful of the rules.
Everybody in the department knew that I was emailing from a personal address. Hundreds of people knew it. People around the government knew it. And, that was what the practice had been, and that's what I did as well.
So I'll take it that you don't accept their conclusion. Just one other question on this. Have you had any contact yet with the FBI, you or your agents, over this matter?
I have not been asked to come in for an interview. I've said I am more than willing since last August, and I would like to do that sooner instead of later and get this matter wrapped up and behind us.
Let's talk about the Second Amendment.
So you notice there at the end, George Stephanopoulos asked, have you or your agents had any contact with the FBI? And she totally dodged that question. She answered a different question and said, I or my agents, which mean her lawyers may have been asked for her to come in for an interview, but she personally hasn't been asked to come in for an interview, and she didn't also answer whether there was any contact. So I thought that was kind of bogus, a dodge there, and there was kind of a dodge at the beginning that I talked about before I showed the clip. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And like I said, that's the last of the 6 clips of Hillary Clinton. She's not my preferred Democratic candidate, although I do think it's most likely that she's going to end up being the Democratic nominee. And as I've said many times, I'm not one of those Bernie or bust people. I will end up voting for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump for reasons that I think will be very easy to justify for the next 5 months if Bernie Sanders is not the nominee, although I haven't totally given up on that. And that's the first clip I want to show of Bernie Sanders is he only did an interview on CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper, and so I'm going to show 6 clips from that interview. Not the entire interview. If you want to see the entire interview, there's a link down in the video description. But this is first Jake Tapper asking him about if Hillary Clinton wins on Tuesday, and gets more pledged delegates, not including the unpledged delegates, does that mean that it's over? And he doesn't quite say that, but you'll notice nowhere in the interview does CNN ever flash up the number of unpledged delegates, even though they're talking about it. And I will talk about that a little more after you watch Bernie Sanders' answer here.
But even if you do win in California, which is certainly possible according to the latest polling, Secretary Clinton on Tuesday night will declare victory in the nomination race. She'll say that she has enough delegates and will be the nominee.
Well, I think that's kind of not quite accurate, and I think the Democratic National Committee has made that clear, that what she would be doing is combining pledged delegates, those are the real delegates that people vote for, with super delegates, people who are appointed by the committee. And what the DNC has made it very clear is that the media should not lump those two together, because pledged delegates are pledged to the candidates. Super delegates may change their mind.
Will your strategy be different if, after all the contests are over, she has more pledged delegates than you do? Or are you taking this to the convention no matter what?
Look, again, I don't want to speculate about who will end up having more pledged delegates. She is ahead of us right now, no question. But California is coming up. They got 475 pledged delegates here. You don't know what the world is going to be like 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks ago. Let's not forget, Democratic convention is the end of July. That's a long time from today.
What's an area...
Now, that last comment about the Democratic convention being the end of July, I don't know, is that sort of an oblique reference to the email scandal and the possibility of an indictment? I know some Bernie Sanders supporters are hoping for that, and I showed a clip last week where he said he's not hoping for that, and his supporters shouldn't hope for that. But I don't know, that may be what is the meaning of that last part. You can let me know what you think, but one thing I think about that last clip is that would have been a perfect time for CNN to flash up on the screen the number of pledged delegates that each of the candidates have, and it's, like I said, within, I think, 260 rather than that 800 or something delegate gap that they showed when Hillary Clinton was talking. But of course, CNN never did that, which I definitely fault CNN for their coverage this morning because I never saw those numbers shown by CNN at all, although they did show this weird poll in this next clip where Bernie Sanders is talking about his differences with Hillary Clinton. And again, this is a fine question from Jake Tapper, and they talk specifically about climate change. There's a good follow-up, but while he's talking, they flash up this poll, which I think they've totally misinterpreted, and I even have a still image that I'm going to show after the clip and explain why the poll is totally bogus. The question's a good question, and I'll let you watch the answer over here.
It's an important area for California voters to know that you do have some disagreements. Would climate change be an area where there's
It sure would be. I mean, and Secretary Clinton is right, and let's be very clear on this. Trump would be a disaster, and she and I agree on that. In terms of climate change, which here in California, by the way, is an issue of huge consequence. Unlike Donald Trump, the people of California know that climate change is very real, that there is a drought here. And second of all, I worry very much about the future water supply, clean water supply in this country and around the world. I think we have to ban fracking now. Secretary Clinton does not agree with that. She thinks we can, quote unquote, regulate it. You can't regulate fracking effectively. And also, as Secretary of State, she pushed fracking in other countries around the world. Those are pretty fundamental disagreements.
I want to ask you about...
sorry, that's not the question with the follow-up. I'll show that a little later. But that was kind of a weird poll. I don't know if you could see the poll that Jake Tapper or the CNN producers, whoever's in charge of State of the Union there, flashed up on the screen. I have blown it up a little bit here. They're saying national polarization grows. And this is, way down in the bottom, it talks about it. This is from some Pew Research poll. And they say in 1995, there were 21% liberal, 49% mixed, and 30% conservative. And then in 2015, it's 35% liberal, 38% mixed, and 27% conservative. So conservative dropped 3%, liberal grew 14%, and mixed dropped 11%. So that means like 3% moved from conservative to mixed, and then 14% moved from mixed to liberal. That doesn't look like more polarization. To me, that looks like they're getting more liberal. So I don't know what CNN's talking about, why they're interpreting the poll that way. And they show it at the beginning of this next clip also, where Jake Tapper asked Bernie Sanders, I previewed this earlier, where I showed Hillary Clinton talking about the violence, the anti-Trump violence that happened in San Jose, and I thought she used it as a good way to pivot into an attack on Donald Trump inciting violence. This is the still good answer, but not as good answer from Bernie Sanders, talking to Jake Tapper, where this is only like 36 seconds long, where he condemns violence by anybody, but doesn't really pivot the way Hillary Clinton did in this clip.
We've seen by anti-Trump protesters against supporters of Trump. Some of these people who have been very violent have been seen with your signs, Bernie Sanders signs, chanting your name. Do you condemn the violence?
I condemn it absolutely. And let's be very clear. I mean, we got millions and millions of people who are supporting us. And I want to make it clear that any person who is a Bernie Sanders supporter, please, do not in any way, shape, or form engage in violence. That is absolutely not what this campaign is about.
There was an interesting back and forth.
So, like I said, I thought that was a really short answer from Bernie Sanders where he could have expanded on it the way Hillary Clinton did. But you also saw Jake Tapper start the next question. And this is the one with the good follow-up, I thought, that I promised earlier. It's kind of an amusing answer from Bernie Sanders. Jake Tapper asks him about this interchange between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump where she says that he doesn't have the temperament to be commander-in-chief. And then he says, well, she voted for the Iraq War. And you'll see Bernie Sanders says, well, they both have a point. But then there's some interesting follow-up about Libya, which is why this clip is about 3 minutes long over here.
Back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump that I really actually wondered what you thought about it. She said that it's not hard to imagine Donald Trump getting the U.S. into a war because someone got under his, quote, very thin skin. I asked him about that. He said, hey, she's the one that voted to go to war in Iraq, not me. You've been critical of her for that vote as well. I was wondering where you came down on this.
Well, I think, frankly, they both make a point. War and peace issues are obviously of enormous consequence. And this is a guy who, he's attacking this one and he's attacking, ugly words about people. No, he does not have the temperament. Is it possible that something will get him angry and they may want to get us involved in a war? Yeah, I think that is a possibility. On the other hand, let us also be clear. Secretary Clinton's temperament is not Donald Trump's, that's for sure. But she and I, back in 2008, I was in the House, she was in the Senate, we all heard the evidence, the so-called evidence coming from Bush and Cheney about the need to go to war in Iraq. I studied that, I really did. I not only voted against the war in Iraq, I led the opposition to that war. She studied the same information, she supported that war.
Do you think she's too quick on the draw, too eager to use military force?
I worry about that, yeah, I do. I mean, I think that her support for the war in Iraq was not just an aberration. I think that her willingness to kind of push President Obama to overthrow Gaddafi and lead to the kind of instability that we're seeing now in Libya, not inconsistent with her other views on Syria, where she wants a no-fly zone, which I think can suck us into never-ending conflict in that area.
Gaddafi's forces were about to, it looked like, commit mass murder against the rebels and citizens, and the move by Clinton, Obama, etc., and the French and the British was to stop that. Are you arguing that President Sanders would not have intervened?
In that particular instance, probably not. There are other ways to deal with crises. Look, you can always make the case. You can make the case about Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was a murdering thug. You can make the case about Assad in Syria. My God, what he has done to his own people. Or about Gaddafi. These are terrible, brutal dictators. But our job is to think what happens the day after these people are removed, the kind of instability that occurs.
The argument basically is that the world would be better off with Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi still in power than what happened.
The world would be better off with these dictators out of power, but there are ways to get them out of power without causing mass instability and the deaths of many, many, many hundreds of thousands of people.
What ways? Because obviously it's not that easy.
No, it's not that easy, but you bring the entire world together. If your thought is, Jake, or if Secretary Clinton's thought is, and I don't know what it is, that every dictator in the world that's out there, we got to rush in and overthrow them, we disagree very, very much. Certainly the war in Iraq, Bush's era, Clinton's era, has caused us incalculable harm.
You have not been critical of the Clinton.
Now, I think Jake Tapper did a pretty good job of cross-examining Bernie Sanders on his support for some kind of regime change in Libya, and it's kind of similar to what John Dickerson did on Face the Nation, showing that Donald Trump kind of supported intervention. And in some ways, Bernie Sanders came to the same answer that, he wanted different intervention. And, I was never, at least Bernie Sanders isn't like lying and changing his position. I think he's consistently said that he wanted a different kind of intervention, non-military intervention, and he at least stood up for that principle and said that there'd have to be some other way, like diplomatically, not military intervention, while Donald Trump had some like fantasy surgical strike that was not going to leave the power vacuum, which is the real problem, where you don't have any sort of force on the ground to mop up the power vacuum after you take care of Gaddafi, which is the real problem. Anyway, I think Bernie Sanders beats Donald Trump on that answer there. And I also thought, like I said, Jake Tapper did a good job, and that not only similar to what John Dickerson did with Donald Trump, but also similar to what Jake Tapper did with Donald Trump on the issue of the Iraq War, and showing that he didn't really have the evidence to back up the claim that he was always against the Iraq War. And I have two more quick clips of Bernie Sanders, also from the Jake Tapper interview. And this first one I thought was notable. It's only about a minute long, but it shows, kind of like in that last answer, that Bernie Sanders is more and more willing to criticize Hillary Clinton. And this is kind of late in the game for that, I think. But here he is on his concerns about the Clinton Foundation while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, going further than I've heard him go before in this clip.
Critical of the Clinton Foundation, but there are those who say that there's something inherently wrong with an American charity, especially one with ties to a Secretary of State, taking money from the Saudis and other foreign governments that don't represent our values. Is that a fair criticism?
Yes, it is. It is. If you ask me about the Clinton Foundation, do I have a problem when a sitting Secretary of State and a foundation run by her husband collects many millions of dollars from foreign governments, governments which are dictatorships? You don't have a lot of civil liberties or democratic rights in Saudi Arabia. You don't have a lot of respect there for opposition points of view, for gay rights, for women's rights. Yeah, do I have a problem with that? Yeah, I do.
You think it creates an appearance of conflict of interest?
Yeah, I do.
Let's turn.
So that's pretty strong, a pretty strong attack on Hillary Clinton in June. I don't know, maybe it's supposed to help him in the last 7 primaries that are, and then DC is a week from Tuesday, I think, the District of Columbia, but it's almost over. That's the kind of attack if he was going to make it, should have made it several months ago, I think. I mean, there is something to that, but at this point, well, I don't know. You can let me know what you think, if that's a legitimate attack, or, I mean, it's a legitimate attack, but whether it's a well-timed attack, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And I want to show one more clip. I've said some good things about Jake Tapper and CNN and some bad things. This one this is a good answer that Jake Tapper gets from Bernie Sanders, and he even helps him out about, you know, this is a question about the superdelegates, and helps him out partway through, saying, you know, the superdelegates decided before anyone even voted, you know, months or eight months, or I can't remember what he says, but what the time period was. But my criticism is what I said before. This would also be another great clip for CNN to put up the number of pledged delegates compared to superdelegates, which CNN never did in the entire program, either during the Hillary Clinton interview or the Bernie Sanders interview. But this is also, hopefully, what Bernie Sanders proposes here actually turns out to be something that is worked out at the convention, as I will discuss after you watch that last clip for this topic. Last Bernie Sanders clip for the night here.
Let's turn to some issues that no matter what, you're going to have a seat at the table when it comes to the platform of the Democratic Party, whether you're the nominee or whether you're not the nominee. And it seems like last time you and I discussed how you thought that superdelegates might be something the party considers getting rid of.
Here is my problem. My problem is that the process today has allowed Secretary Clinton to get the support of over 400 superdelegates before any other Democratic candidate was in the race. It's like an anointment.
Before anyone voted even.
8 months. 8 months before the first vote was cast in Iowa. Frankly, I think that's an absurd process. To the degree that superdelegates make any sense, and I don't know that they do, theoretically, their job is to say, take the broad view, look at what's going on, who is the strongest candidate, not to be part of an anointment process before any other candidate comes on board. That's just the moneyed interest and the establishment talking. So I think at the Democratic National Convention, there is going to be a lot of discussion about reforming that issue. in that process.
We did a profile this week, Jeff Zell.
So I hope what Bernie Sanders said there is true, that there actually is reform of the whole superdelegate process, which I think goes back to a response to George McGovern in 1972 or whatever. But I think that the the process for the big D Democratic Party should be as little d democratic as possible, and the superdelegates aren't very democratic, and especially with the way they've sort of tipped the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton during this election season, which is why every single program I've done during every Sunday, I point out over and over again that the unpledged delegates don't actually have to make up their minds until the convention, which that may be also what Bernie Sanders meant in that earlier clip about it's 5 weeks till the end of July to the Democratic convention. Maybe it wasn't some oblique reference to emails, although given what he said about Hillary Clinton in that interview, some of the sharper attacks there, maybe that is what he meant. Like I said, that's the last Bernie Sanders clip, the last clip on the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race. So this week, Gary Johnson, the Libertarian Party presidential candidate, did an interview over on NBC's Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. And I'm just going to show, I showed some Gary Johnson clips a few weeks back before he was the nominee. And I wanted to show a brief clip, about 49 seconds, I think, where I think Gary Johnson sums up the really, I guess what you would call the elevator pitch for the Libertarian Party, which I think is has a possibility to appeal to enough voters to at least get him to the 15% level where he has a chance to be in the debates. And then, of course, Chuck Todd follows up with the obvious spoiler questions, which I think Gary Johnson has a good response to, as I will just... and then after I show this clip, I will have an extended discussion of both the Libertarian Party and third parties from Matt Welch, who's from Reason Magazine, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is one of my favorite physicist celebrities, I guess. And they were on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher in the Overtime section. But first, here's the actual Libertarian Party candidate, Gary Johnson, summing up his party and explaining why he's not a spoiler for the Republicans or the Democrats over in this clip.
The notion that most people, I think, are fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And most people, I think, recognize that our military interventions, for the most part, are having the unintended consequence of making things worse, not better.
Are you comfortable with the idea that you might be a spoiler?
I don't think I'm going to be a spoiler in this. I think it's a draw from both sides. And
do you believe that, though? Do you think you're going to draw equally, or do you think that ultimately you're going to become the sort of the way station for Republicans that can't support Trump?
You know, my name has appeared in 3 national polls, 10%, 10%, 11%, and in those polls they did a bit of analysis and actually determined that I took more votes away from Hillary. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a draw from both sides.
How much have you reached out?
I don't know. I find it hard to believe that Gary Johnson, a former Republican governor, and his running mate, William Weld, a former Republican governor, would take more votes away from the Democratic nominee than the Republican nominee, especially when there's this split in the Republican Party where there are a lot of Republicans who have difficulty supporting and voting for Donald Trump. That seems like the natural place that those people would go is to these more moderate Republicans. And that's kind of discussed over, like I said, on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher over in the Overtime section. And you can watch the entire 12.5-minute Overtime discussion between all the panelists. I put a link down in the video description. It's free on YouTube. It actually happens on YouTube live, although I almost never watch it live. But I thought Matt Welch said some interesting things about the Libertarian Party, but I especially like some of the observations of Neil deGrasse Tyson, as I will discuss after you watch that final clip for the broadcast tonight. Over here.
Matt, what is the likelihood that an alternative third-party candidate emerges as a real possibility in this election?
It's as likely as it has been, certainly since Ralph Nader in 2000. And it's a black swan year in so many different ways. You won't lose money by betting against third parties in America. That's always been the rule. But we've never seen unfavorability ratings this high of two major party candidates. People kind of hate them both within their own political tribes, right? Democrats and Republicans do. And the Libertarian Party, which is the only party that's going to be on all 50 ballots, that's not one of the major two. They've never polled this high at this point. They always poll high early, but
they're
they'll
going
go
to do
down
well
later.
because they have two Republican former blue state governors who got reelected, which is exactly the kind of Republican that the GOP currently has rejected. And if they get 15%, they get in the debates, and the duopoly keeps trying to keep out more choices from our elections, and they really better stop getting in that way because the number of independents has doubled in the last 25 years. The parties have flatlined. That's people sending a message about dissatisfaction and dysfunction.
I think that there's a lesson here that if you really analyze it, if you step back and analyze it, I think Trump is in fact the third party candidate.
He might be breaking up the Republican Party.
Yeah, exactly. If he's running as a Republican and hardly any Republican supports him, he's a third party candidate.
Yeah.
So he's what happens when you rise up looking like you're part of the establishment, but you're not, and then he appeals. Now you have people voting for what would have been a third-party candidate that wouldn't have because they would fear that the third-party candidate wouldn't get elected.
He kind of Trojan horsed the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, which Bernie Sanders would love to do in his own way in the Democratic Party. I mean, Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, right? He's a legitimate challenge to existing Democratic Party structure, making the race a hell of a lot more interesting as a result. It could be that in our hearts we're a four-party country that's been having two parties.
I actually think the real divisions in politics are not liberal and conservative. I think that's actually, and they used to think this way, it's radicals, reactionaries, and reformers. You get people on the far right, you get people on the far left, and you get people in the center who want evolution, not revolution. I think that's a much saner way to think about our politics.
No, there are two kinds of voters, informed and underinformed.
But that
the two-party system. That's your two-party.
That path lies a lot of liberal condescension.
Yeah, right.
To say that the people
and liberals are often uninformed as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are also getting their news from their Facebook feed.
I didn't attach one word to one party or the other.
I know.
He just
at all.
I know.
But you did kind of earlier when you're talking about Trump voters that we need to educate them.
If you don't like Trump, it means you don't like the people voting for Trump. That's all I said. And so if you don't like it because you think they should think about data differently, then you need to educate them.
But we need to separate out the supporters of Trump and Trump.
It's an if-then statement is what Neil deGrasse Tyson said there at the end about how you have to educate Trump voters. And I think that point that he made that Donald Trump is a symptom of a problem, that is the voters who support him, I agree with that more, I think, than that he's the third-party candidate. I mean, he is the result of the Tea Party, I think, but he's showing that the Tea Party has basically taken over the Republican Party. And you saw, I think, the way Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, the head of the Republican Senate and the Republican House, have fallen in line. Even though they don't support everything Donald Trump says, they're at least supporting him in the election, as Mitch McConnell said, because the party of Lincoln wants to win. And so that part, I don't agree so much with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh, and that other guy who was talking, I noticed John Smith down in the comment section. Mentioned that's John Avalon from the Daily Beast, and he says that Chelsea Clinton's on the board of the Daily Beast. I didn't have time to check if that's true. It's probably true. I don't have any reason to disbelieve that, but the other guy who was talking, other than Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Maher, that was John Avalon from the Daily Beast. So I appreciate John Smith posting that comment to remind me to say that was the other person talking in the clip, and I appreciate all of you who joined me live, all of you who watches the recorded show. If you want to help support me picking out all these clips and spending I think it's more like 12 or 14 hours every Sunday on this, you can become one of my patrons. Currently, I think I'm just dropped a little below $400 if you per month. If you look down in the video description, there's a link down there that's is only about $100 per Sunday. That's not quite minimum wage, certainly not $15 minimum wage. I'm hoping to get that up to enough patrons to give me the $15 minimum wage by the 2016 election, and that's when I'll decide whether to keep doing this show after November based in part on that revenue, because the YouTube ad revenue seems to keep going down all the time. I don't know why that is, but you can also help me with YouTube revenue by clicking on a little eye up here in the corner and giving me fan funding. Or you can just support me by posting your comments, sharing this on the internet, subscribing to my channel, just clicking on the subscribe button, giving me a thumbs up. All those things help. So I appreciate all the support from my viewers, both financial and, I don't know, would that be spiritual or just social media-wise, whatever it is. And I will be back next Sunday. It's most likely that I may be able to do this early, or I may have to do it late. There's another graduation I have to go to, just like I have to leave. Well, I have to leave now. So thanks for joining me, and I will hopefully make another edited, produced video this week. If not, I'll be back next Sunday for another live clip roundup. And until then, I'll see you all around the internet.